5 weeks to go to presidential elections in the United States. Campaigns by both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump impacted by Hurricane Helene, the storm leading to over 100 deaths and causing some of the worst flood damage ever for North Carolina. Harris, for her part, had to curtail a trip to Las Vegas to head back to Washington for briefings. While Trump is heading to one of the disaster zones to see the impact on the ground, he also set up a hurricane relief fundraiser that collected over $1 million. Well, here's the latest from the current administration and Harris on the hurricane.
The devastation from Hurricane Helene is immense. Millions of Americans are without power. Thousands of families have lost their homes. Entire neighborhoods have been destroyed. Major roads have been blocked or damaged, leaving entire towns inaccessible at this very moment. Already, nearly 100 people have been confirmed dead, and hundreds more are missing. The destruction we have seen in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia is heartbreaking. In coordination with state and local officials, President Biden and I will continue to make sure that communities have the support and the resources that they need, not only to respond to this storm and its immediate aftermath, but also the resources they will need to recover.
And this all comes as the US presidential running mates gear up for their first and only debate of the 2024 campaign. Just 5 weeks to go now to Election Day. JD Vance and Walz will be facing off this Tuesday. Well, to give us an idea of what to look out for and which way the US may be leaning, let's cross over and speak to lecturer at US politics at Queen Mary University in London, Mr. Richard Johnson. Mr. Johnson, thanks for your time. Listening there to Kamala Harris, who had to leave her presidential campaign trail to go back to Washington to deal with the hurricane. Is being in administration a help or a hindrance at this stage?
Well, first of all, I mean, the situation is deeply tragic, and I just want to acknowledge that point before we talk about the politics of it. In terms of the politics, this is a moment for Vice President Harris to present herself as a presidential figure, as a figure of great weight and substance. I think that one of the apprehensions that Democrats had when they were considering whether to replace Kamala Harris, Joe Biden with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, was she had a bit of a reputation as vice president with being a bit of a sort of lighthearted figure. During this campaign, I think she's really demonstrated herself to be a person of great seriousness and substance, and this is a moment that will be testing her. To your question about being the incumbent, is this a plus or a minus in political terms? It's a moment of potential hazard as well. When George W. Bush was president, his administration was deemed to have badly mishandled the 2005 Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And although he had just been reelected, so it didn't have any direct impact on his reelection prospects, that was really the beginning of the end of the Bush presidency in terms of public opinion, and George W. Bush left the White House, one of the most unpopular presidents in US history. So if the Biden administration is seen to get the recovery wrong, then that can be a very, very serious problem for the Harris campaign. But at the same time, if it's seen to do a good job, then this is a moment that could really elevate her campaign and her substance.
Okay, all to play for, but we are coming back to, as in pretty much every election campaign, I feel the main issue for voters is notably the economy.
It is, and the polls do show that the economy is top of mind for American voters, as well as issues like immigration and abortion, but really it does come back to the economy. This has been an area of some weakness for Vice President Harris because there is a perception, rightly or wrongly, in the American public that the economy is not as strong as it ought to be. And in fact, that's a consequence of how inflation has been felt. And although inflation now has got under control, people see a price difference, right? Getting inflation under control doesn't mean that prices go back to the way they were 3 or 4 years ago. It just means they stop going up at a precipitously high rate. And I think in the debate that Harris did against Trump, although she had a very strong debate, her answers on the economy at the start of the debate were probably her weakest moments in the debate, because she's in an awkward position where she's a member of the Biden administration, so she wants to defend that record, but she also wants to pivot away from that record and suggest that she can improve things. So I think this could be a bit of a challenge for something we'll keep an eye out for in the vice presidential debate as well. Walz is a bit freer because he's not a member of the incumbent administration. And so perhaps he has an opportunity to put a little bit more distance between the Harris-Walz campaign and the Biden administration on the economy.
Indeed, tell us a bit more about how you see this vice presidential or the running mate debate that is to take place this Tuesday in the United States. I mean, how important is that for the overall campaign?
I mean, typically we would say that debates have a low impact and vice presidential debates have an even lower impact. I mean, there are moments in American history where there are some memorable lines from vice presidential debates. Probably the most famous is in 1988 when the Democratic vice presidential nominee, Senator Lloyd Bentsen of Texas, said to the Republican nominee, Senator Dan Quayle of Indiana, Senator Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. You all know Jack Kennedy, after Quayle compared himself to John F. Kennedy. But generally speaking, it doesn't really get much better than that. And I think there are some reasons, however, why this vice presidential debate might assume a bit more weight than usual. One is that vice presidential debates are often sandwiched in between presidential debates. And so they're usually overshadowed by the presidential debate that follows. At the moment, we're not expecting there to be another presidential debate. So this is the last time that the two campaigns will square off. Secondly, both Walz and JD Vance are relatively unknown figures in the American public. Although Walz has been a politician since 2006, when he was first elected to the House of Representatives, he was really unknown on the national stage, unknown outside of his home state of Minnesota, until this summer when Harris picked him. And JD Vance has only been in elected politics for 2 years. He was elected to Ohio, a senator for Ohio, just in the midterm elections. So both candidates have an opportunity to introduce themselves further to the American public, but also an opportunity to try to redefine their opponents. And the final thing I'll just say is this is a very close race, and this could be the closest race in recent times. And marginal differences, small differences, could tip the balance in the election. And so anything that could make even a modest shift in the polls, a shift of 1 or 2 points, one way or another, in a few swing states, could be highly consequential.
Richard Johnson from Queen Mary University in London, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Thanks for joining us.